Okay, my name is Lon Wampler. I'm from Tuttle, Oklahoma. I was a sophomore in high school when World War II started. And the high school boys in my school drove the school buses when they were seniors. So when the war started, or the year before the war started, when I was a junior, the next year I was going to get to drive the school bus. Boy, I liked that. So when the school started the next year, of course, we had already had Pearl Harbor. And I went the first 6 weeks of my senior year in high school, and me and another kid decided we just had to go get in the Army. So we went to Oklahoma City to the induction center, and it was a huge place. And there was guys there from all over the state. And to be honest with you, it was a harassment to go to that thing. And we were in line, all lined up. And when we got up to the final desk where they made all the notes on the physical they was giving us, the guy in front of me was an older guy, and I guess he was an alcoholic. Anyway, he was rejected. So the guy, I handed him my papers, and he just stamped it. Well, he was used to stamping them accepted, that he forgot to put the rejected one down, and he stamped mine rejected. So I went on through to the next place, and it was a second lieutenant, I think, at that position. And he looked at it and he said, "What they reject you for?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, you go back and you haven't changed that." He said, "There ain't anything on here that rejects you." Well, that was the first mistake I made, I guess. Anyway, they put us on the bus and sent us down to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which was an infantry and cavalry base at that time. We spent about 2 days there. When we got there, the first thing we do, they take us in, give us a complete issue of clothes, have us go put them clothes up, and come back and eat. And then the next day we did KP. You know what KP was? Okay. And as soon as we get through feeding one bunch, we had to take the tables, come apart, and we'd wash them and scrub them with a GI brush and set them outside to dry. And before they could get dry, we had to carry them back in there, assemble them, because here come another busload. About every 2 hours, there'd be a busload of inductees coming from Oklahoma City down there to start processing into the service. And I think I spent 3 days there, and then we got orders to go to Shepherd Army Airfield at Wichita Falls, Texas. Spent about 2 weeks there at Wichita Falls, and we got down there, and the dust would blow in your face. You was walking in mud, but sand would still hit you in the face. I thought, boy, I'll be glad to get out of this place. And all it was an assignment process. They give us batteries of tests, and that's where they determined what tech schools we was going to be sent to. So I spent just about 10 days there, I guess. I got my orders to go to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And that was go to radio operator and mechanic school. Well, that was a pretty long trip on the train for me, you know, at that age and that time in my life. But we got up there in November. I enlisted in October. In November, we got to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We got out on the ice, and I never seen the ground. And went all the way through that 18-week course of radio operator mechanic, and I'd never seen the ground in South Dakota. It was actually miserable. They had them old black single wall barracks, I think, that they designed to have down in Mississippi and Alabama along the coast. Up there we had 3 old pot-bellied stoves, coal burners, and you couldn't keep anything clean. And I slept. They had one a third of the way down in the middle, and then 2/3 of the way down. And I slept on the bottom bunk, about forcing here to use that stove. And I could roll over with my back to the fire and blow my breath out across that room. That's how cold it was in that place. And then I got sick up there and went to the hospital. And this was one of the kind of strange things that happened to me. I had tonsillitis, and I lived on ice cream for about a week. Finally decided, well, you got to go to the dispensary. You got to go find out what's better. I had tonsillitis. Doctor looked in my throat, and he said, your tonsils look like 2 big roses in there. And he said, you need to go to the hospital, but the hospital's full. He said, oh, but Ward B16 or something like that. Well, Ward B16 didn't mean nothing to me. So I got a shaving kit. I didn't have to shave about once a week anyway, and reported over to the hospital. And went in the door of this, in the hospital. Do you remember what they looked like? They were just long hallways with buildings out to the sides of it, and they had 2 or 3 arms of those things with just wards out by themselves sticking out from that main walkway. And I got inside there and looked around, and they had quite a few older guys in there. They only had one young guy in there, and they signed me a cot, and they didn't take my shaving kit at that point. But later on, I hadn't shaved for a week or so I took my shaving kit, went in the shower room, washroom, and got my stuff out and put it up there, and pretty soon I looked around, and here's a guy sitting on a stool between me and the door, just sitting there, and I looked at him a little bit, and I said, what's the matter? And he said, nothing the matter with me, what's wrong with you? I said, nothing, I just thought I'd come in here and shave. And I said, no, he said, well, I thought I'd just come in here and watch you. And I said, well, I think I can do it by myself. And he said, well, I'll just watch you anyway. And that's when I found out that I was in the psycho ward. And this, after about 3 or 4 days, the first thing I did, I got to see a doctor, and he lanced my tonsils and said, we can't take them out now, but when they get better, we'll have to take your tonsils out. Okay. And I stayed in there, I don't know, about a week, I guess. But this young guy was pretty level-headed. I could tell them other guys was kind of nuts. They played poker, and one guy was in there and he had sores all over him, and he'd walk around, and none of them wanted him to get close to them. Boy, they made him stay away. And this young guy told me, he said, there's nothing the matter with me, but he said, I'm going to get a Section 8. I'm going to get out of this service. And he said, every once in a while I throw a fit. And he said, when I throw a fit, I really get things stirred up around here. And I didn't know if he was just telling me a big one or not, but about 2 days after that, he's laying there and he started moaning, not very loud. And it just kept growing and growing and growing. And pretty soon he put his hands up to his chest like this and moaning a little bit louder. And pretty soon he got loud enough where they could hear him up front. Well, one of the ward guys come back there and tried to straighten his arms out and talk to him. He wasn't having any part of that. And he clenched his arms down to his chest like this. And before that incident was over with, that guy had 4 doctors in there trying to straighten him out. They couldn't straighten his arm out, and he was just trying to kick at him. Each arm and leg was held down by them guys, and they finally just picked him up, took him to him in the padded cell, and he just made a heck of a racket for about an hour, and finally he quit. When he come out, he laid down on the bed, and when they left, he said, see how much fun I can have out of that. But then, of course, as soon as my throat got where I could eat, I got out of there, and I don't know what happened to him. I went back, I had to graduate a week behind the rest of the class, but I caught up with them anyway. After that, me and a guy named William F. Waddell, he was from Spartanburg, South Carolina. We were, and they assigned us by what your last name start with, and then barracks. And his name was Waddell, my name was Wampler, and we had a guy in there named Warner. And the 3 of us kind of run together. I never did even go off the base and go to town when it was up there. Didn't need to, and there was snow and ice. And we had a base commander that had been at Pearl Harbor. He was a brigadier general. And if you remember seeing the pictures of Pearl Harbor, how they had all the airplanes lined up like a West Point troop out for inspection. Perfect for the Japs to get all of them nearly. Well, they demoted that gentleman, and he was the commander. Narcissus L. Cody was his name, and I never will forget that name. And he was just contrary, you know. He was mad because he got reduced from brigadier general to full colonel. I don't know why they didn't discharge him and keep him out of service, but they didn't. Well, me and this kid Waddell went and took tests for navigator, bombardier, and pilot. We thought we'd try that. Well, we passed the examination, and he shipped out ahead of me since I was a week later graduating. And when I graduated, then they sent him to Santa Ana, California, and they sent me to Santa Ana, California. And of course, I didn't know that until I run into him at Santa Ana, which was a pre-flight school. It was nothing but no airplanes, just classroom, navigation, engines, airframe, airplane engine, and all that crap. And after we got through that, we went to, well, he was ahead of me. I never did see him after that. he left and went to Merced or someplace there in California, and they sent me to Phoenix or Glendale, Arizona, which was 20 miles from Phoenix at that time, but since then it's grown together over there. The Thunderbird 1 was a primary pilot school. They had the old PT-17 Stearman, and they had civilian instructors, all except for the commander and the guy that give you find a check ride to say send him on or send him home or do whatever you want to with him. And I had a guy named Bert D. Rhodes as the instructor, and he was a fine guy. And he got to tell me one time that I don't know how much flying you ever did or anything like that, but he told me that he knew a guy that had done instead of going up and doing a loop, went over, pushed the nose over and went down with you on the outside, and then turned out and rolled out on the bottom. So he said, "You want to try one of them?" Well, the instructors was in the front cockpit and we was in the back. Well, I was watching his face. He had a little mirror up there so he could see me. We had Gosport tubes, like a stethoscope or something, you know, you had in your ears and a thing to talk in like that, and that's all the communication we had. And I thought, just looking in that mirror and seeing his eyes, he didn't have his goggles down off of his helmet, and it looked like his eyes were going to pop out of his head. That was a brutal maneuver to make. So when we rolled out of that and landed, we both agreed, but we wouldn't try that no more. One time was enough for that. Well, after I graduated from there, I went to Marana Air Force Base in north of Tucson, about halfway between Tucson and Casa Grande, out in the desert, nothing but cactus, and brush, and sand. And I had put in my preference I wanted to be a fighter pilot, because the P-38s and the Corsairs, the Marine Corsairs, they're at Santa Ana, they'd get up there and dogfight continually. And if a Corsair got on the P-38's tail, the guy climbed, he could just climb, and the Corsair would be right behind him, and pretty soon the Corsair would fall off. P-38 going up a little ways and then roll out on top. Kind of made them Corsairs look bad as far as climbing and maneuverability. But anyway, I had a guy there, and his name has slipped me right now, but he was also a civilian, but I'll say a civilian because they just brought him in the Army, put second lieutenant uniforms on them, and they were instructor pilots. And this guy I got was from Denver, and he probably weighed 250 pounds and was about that tall. Red-headed, had a little mustache, almost bald. And when they first assigned this, he's sitting on a sawed-off piece of fence row where they had a little kind of rails built there. And he started over at this side. There was 6 of us, and I was on this end. And all these other guys now had just gone through pre-flight school, but I'd already had it year and a half in the service and been through radio school. So he asked each one of them a question, kind of stupid question. All the way around when he got around to me, by then I was kind of grinning at the questions he was asking. And honestly, he sat there, he was a disgrace to the uniform. He had on green pants with their pink shirt and that OD tie, and it was tied in a little bitty knot. And he never untied it. He just pulled it down like this and took it off over his head and back. And the knot was just filthy. You know, he couldn't pass any kind of inspection if they inspected him also. And he and I didn't hit it off real good. And he told me that he was gonna wash me out. And I didn't believe it. I believed I could just prove him wrong. And after about 2 weeks, why, we landed, and we didn't go to basic airplanes, we went to advanced. We went to 86s instead of the OB-13s and 15s. And we landed, and my ears was kind of plugged up. In them airplanes, the student flew in the front cockpit and the instructor flew in the rear. And I was sitting in there filling out the Form 1s. And I just had a feeling he was talking to me, but I really wasn't hearing him. But I glanced out there, and he'd already got out and was standing down by the wing on the left side of the airplane. And when I looked at him, and I don't know how long he'd been talking to me, but he stormed away from there. And the next day I had a check ride with Captain Howard, and he was the commander of that little training group. And I flew with him, and he said, well, I don't really see anything wrong with your flying, but to get you away from this guy, we're going to put you over in the BT-15 group where you would have normally went anyway. So I went over there and flew 2 or 3 flights with a brand new second lieutenant. His name was Harnicky. And you all know the story about the Okies back in the Dust Bowl days. Well, this kid he was about, probably a year older than I was, but he graduated and he wanted to be an instructor. They made him an instructor in the BT-13s. And I flew with him 2 or 3 days, and he said, I don't know why they sent you back here. Said there's nothing there with your flying. And we kept talking, walking back across the ramp, and he said, where are you from anyway? I said, I'm from Oklahoma. You know, that guy shut his mouth and never said another word to me. And the next day I was up for flight check again. So I said, well, I'm through with this. I ain't putting up that kind of dang stuff. So from there I went to Kingman, Arizona, went through gunnery school, and from there to the Plant Park, Tampa, Florida. Got assigned to a crew and went back to Gulfport, Mississippi, Gulfport Army Airfield, and we assembled a crew there. And we flew about 12 or 13 missions. And they just told you, go to your airplane, go fly, go pick you out some targets and bomb them and come back, you know. And that's what we did. It took us about 60 days to get to that training. And then we was headed for Italy. We had all of our crew together, and we went to Marietta, Georgia. Picked up a brand new B-17. Went to Presque Isle, Maine, Goose Bay, Labrador, Iceland, and then down to Prestwick, Scotland. And from Prestwick, Scotland, we thought we was going to the 8th Air Force, but we didn't. We just delivered that airplane to them, and they sent us by train down to a replacement depot in Stoke-on-Trent, I think was the name of that place then. And then we got on a Goonie bird and went on to Naples. And from there, they shipped us up to Fort 6 there, bombing. I flew a complete tour. I flew 35 sorties.
And then you got double credit for some missions?
Yeah. They give us two missions for 2 credits if we flew night missions, intruder missions, and our aircraft commander, Lieutenant Meyer, volunteered the crew to do these night missions. And we were briefed, if you're flying up there and the sky is clear, turn out and come home. Don't go up there over clear skies, because the fighters will get you. And we'd go from cloud bank to cloud bank to hide from the Jerry's. We never did really see any, but one night we broke out of one bunch of clouds, and the tail gunner said, there's fighters, it's 6 o'clock. And he said, they're shooting at it. Well, he was seeing the stars. He wasn't no airplanes there. But, well, we harassed that guy for the rest of our tour or whatever.
How many night missions did you fly?
We just flew 2, and then they canceled them.
What was the purpose of flying the night missions as opposed to the day?
Just nuisance.
Oh, I see. Okay, harassment.
Harassment.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it was more dangerous, really, for us to go to town and back in that mud. It was muddy over there all the time. If you ever seen any pictures, in the wintertime, mud, snow, slick. And they'd send a 6x truck or 4x4 or whatever they call them, them old high bed trucks, with a water tank, 2-wheel water tank. And we've even ridden on those water tanks, and you had a little walk about that wide. And the old road was rough, and the guys drove as fast as they could on a semi-blacktop road in the Foggia. We'd go in and hit every. They didn't have but one bar that was authorized for us to be in. We'd go in there and have a few drinks and ride back on them trailers and stuff. Now that was more dangerous than flying combat mission. But we did it anyway. So I finished my missions, and I flew 35. They raised it from 25 sorties to 35 sorties because of the fighter situation in Germany. They had lost so many airplanes that they weren't near as dangerous as they were at the first of the war. And when the 8th Air Force was in England, the 15th was in the mouth of nothing, and it was in North Africa. And them was the guys that really got hurt, was the 8th Air Force, and because the Jerry's had lots of airplanes when they were over there. Flak was a whole lot worse because they built a whole lot more 88mm guns in that period of time, and they concentrated more on them. Palesti was one of them. You've heard about the Palesti oil field, and Vienna, Austria was a pretty hot target. And that group flew the longest non-stop bombing mission for B-17. And we went to Berlin from Fort Italy and back.
How long did that take you?
It was, I'm just going to guess, but it took us about 9 hours to go that route. The day before, they had gone to Rudin, which was 75 miles south of Berlin. And they decided, well, if we can get there, we can get on up to Berlin and back. So we made that one. And that's it. That's the longest B-17 in Europe anyway. Now, I don't know about the Pacific. They use them over there, but that airplane only flies so long on what gas they got, so. But they claim that was the longest one. Well, they were tip tanks on the B-17. They put the regular wing tanks in, starting at the fuselage out, but they put some additional ones clear out in the wing tips. And we always burnt that first and got it out in wing tips so the wing tips wouldn't be heavy. But that was just giving that much range more. So that's where that verbiage, Tokyo, we just called them tip tanks, but that's what they was referring to, was that tip tanks on those B-17s. We had, there was up in the Udine Valley in northern Italy, the Italians still had just a handful of fighters, and they weren't really aggressive. But Me-262, that jet airplane, that they had a 163, which was a little single, just a little toy-looking thing. But they had that 262. I don't know if you've ever seen one over here. That airplane would eat your lunch.
It flew through your formation then?
Yeah. They just make one pass through because they didn't have much fuel. They had to get up, hit us, and then back to the ground. They couldn't hang around and fight. And there was one guy shot one of them down, but he was chasing something else when that one flew in his line of fire. And he got credit for shooting down a 262 over there. They just come whistling through this, well, you know how fast the old F-80s was. They'd get up there around almost nearly 500 miles an hour. And we didn't even have them yet. They sent one over there that wasn't to our group. And I seen it fly around a time or two, but it never seen any combat or anything. Yeah, when you finished your missions over there, they give you 2 days to clear the field. And you got on a truck and went to Naples, and they had a troop ship there. When I finished my missions, there was a troop ship docked there at Naples. And I think I was just there 2 days. Then they had a load, said the Army, and everybody was going. This wasn't just an Air Force thing. And when we were about halfway back, it took about 10 days to 2 weeks, because them things wasn't about 8 knots things, and they zigzagged. And we were about halfway home when the captain of the ship made the announcement that Axis had surrendered, that the war was over. But he said, we're going to continue to wigwag across here because there may be some submarines out here that
Didn't get the
word
message.
yet.
Yeah.
So we made it to Boston all right. And they give us a 30-day leave. And married people went to Miami Beach for reassignment. They had closed that OCS school that they had down there, and we were right in them fine hotels right on the beach. And went down there for reassignment, and the single guys went to base in North Carolina, and I can't remember the name of that base, but it's still there. And they gave me two options. They said you could either transfer from here, go to B-29s, and go to the Far East, or you can take a discharge. I had enough points to get discharged. You had to have 80 points or something like that, and I don't know what they graded it against, but you had to have 80 points, and I had about 85 points or something like that. So.
And you chose to do what?
I said, I'll just get out. So I did. I got on a train, went back to Fort Chaffee in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Was there about 2 days and got out, and I stayed out of the service about 2.5 years. And times was still pretty hard back there in them days. And when I first got out, we started this, I went to a school to be a railroad telegrapher because I had code, but we had international Morse code, and the railroad used American code, and it was this opposite. And it was confusing to me, and I didn't care much about it, and they guaranteed you a job when you got through, and they sent me in another one down Mississippi to a little old town that was out on the end of a spur, and the old guy that run that thing just wouldn't let us do nothing. He'd open it up at 8 o'clock. He had the stool set in this corner and in that corner. He said, you guys sit down on that. And he wouldn't let us copy any train messages. He wouldn't let us do nothing. Quit time come, he'd say, okay, sweep up and clean up, and empty the paper and go home. Well, they wasn't paying us anything, see. Well, we run out of money, and when I got down where I just had enough money to go home on, I told this other kid, he had the car. I said, I'm going home. I ain't going to stay down here. That guy ain't ever going to see that we get a job as station manager. So I went home, and I worked for 2 years, and then February of 48, or January 48, I just said, I'm going to go re-enlist. And I went and re-enlisted. And from then on, I really had a good career after that.
Did you retire from the Army Air Force?
Yeah.
Did you?
I went to Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico, and that was a good assignment. I was on flying status, and we had 5 B-29s, and Sandia Base was right next door to us, and they handled the atomic business. And we had a bombing range out at the Salton Sea, on the east shore of the Salton Sea. And we had 5 B-29s in there. We had good crews, good maintenance. And we used to fly those missions out there. And they didn't drop too many of them big old bombs. And we come back one time, and my job on that was when they got ready to bomb, the bomb bay doors was open. When we were on the bomb run, I had to turn some switches on to operate some instruments to photograph them so they could see, because when that bomb released from its shackles, that B-29 jumped straight up about 300 feet. And I had no idea what it weighed. And they had a pit over on that Sandia base, and they'd taxi an airplane over there, taxi it over that pit, and then hoist that bomb up in the bomb bay and put it on its shackles, and then close up the thing, and then they could taxi off of it. And I asked us, and we had a lot of civilians, and we had a lot of security people. And the first thing they briefed us on when we got to Albuquerque was, what you see here and what you hear here, when you leave here, leave it here. Because that atomic stuff was at sea, still this brand new stuff. And they was doing a lot of work with that. Big old, huge bombs, painted orange and white stripe. And you could watch them from 25,000 feet all the way to the ground. It was fun. When the Korean War started, though, they cleaned out Kirtland Air Force Base. We had about 13 guys in the shop. And everybody that had air crew duty left within 2 days. And we went down to MacDill Field to a bomb group down there. Went to a training course there. Then we went back to Randolph Air Force Base. And they discontinued the cadet training at Randolph, which was the West Point of the Air Force, of course, with Taj Mahal and the T-6s. And put them on B-29s in there, and then they started calling back the reserves. And them old airplanes had been in storage over at Tucson. They went over there and kicked the cocoons off of them and flew them over there, and they were ragged. They were ragged airplanes. I don't think we ever flew a mission that we didn't feather an engine. And we was losing one a month at Randolph. And they were all happening on the final approach. Get down to about 300 feet, they'd have an engine fire. And that's a little bit too low and too close to ground to do anything at that point. You're just in big trouble. And then after we got out of the B-29 business, I went to Little Rock, Arkansas. Little Rock Air Force Base. We had B-47s. I was in that program for 5 years and went to K.I. Sawyer and got the B-52H airplanes. And from there went to Scottsville, Illinois, to Military Airlift Command. I put in a year there, and then I decided I'd just retire. I had 20 years after my wartime duty, so I just told them goodbye.